VIU Online presents GEC 101 English Composition, Week 2, Practical Lecture, Research, Documentation, and APA Style. This lecture is presented by Dr. Laura Hills, Professor of English at Virginia International University. As we saw in our theoretical lecture and in our readings this week, it's important to do some work before beginning to write. But what does that mean practically? Here are some things that you can do before writing. You already know something about doing research, and the research projects that interest you are easier and more enjoyable. So research rarely progresses in a neat line from start to finish, and good research can help you become a genuine expert. So you see a theme developing here, that research is going to be a timely process, time-consuming process, but well worthwhile. You're going to ask questions like, what's the assignment? How many sources should you use, and what kinds of sources? How many pages is the length of your project supposed to be? What is your purpose? Is it to inform? Is it to persuade? Is it to report? Who is your audience beyond your instructor and classmates? To whom are you speaking? What is your topic if one has been assigned? How can you narrow your topic? And what do you need to know before heading forward? A very good place to begin is by analyzing the assignment. Read it over more than once and be sure you absolutely understand what it is that you have been asked to do. And if you don't know, if you're not 100% clear about your assignment, ask your professor. It is far better to do this than to create an entire research project that does not fulfill your professor's expectations. Another question to consider is, what is your rhetorical stance? Who are you in this paper? Are you a researcher? Are you someone who's done original research? Are you a scholar finding out what other people have said? Are you someone who's personally involved in your topic? Have you had experience with it? Do you have an opinion? How did you formulate this opinion? That's your rhetorical stance. Do you have any biases or preconceived notions about your topic? In some scholarly writing, you are absolutely required to reveal those biases. For instance, if you ever get to the point in your studies where you are writing a doctoral dissertation, you will be required to explain who you are in relation to your topic and whether you come to it with any experience, biases, or preconceived notions. You have to admit those in the research. When is your deadline, and how are you going to meet or exceed that deadline? You know your working style, and though many college students put off the work until the last possible moment, I guess you can predict what I'm about to say. It makes much more sense to plan your work so that you're not fighting the deadline. Be realistic about the research and writing you can do in the time you have. You have only so much time for an academic research project. If it's for a course, it has a due date. And you may have 17 more sources you'd like to research and more things you'd like to know, but at some point you have to end the project and submit it for a grade. Be realistic about what you can accomplish in the time you have. The result of narrowing your topic is a research question that can be tentatively answered by your research. But what does that mean practically? Well, let's look at topics and research questions. On the left side of this page, we have topics, and on the right, research questions. So let's look at the first bullet item on the left. The topic is the effect of messaging on youth literacy. And the question you might formulate is, How has the popularity of messaging affected literacy among today's youth? A second topic might be the benefits of online learning for introverted college students. So the question that comes from that topic, what are the benefits of online learning for introverted college students? And a third example, the role of mentors and role models for women in leadership leads to this question. What is the role of mentors and role models for women in leadership? But why are research questions important in academic writing? They are important because you are about to make a powerfully large leap from being a student to being a scholar. When you are becoming an academic writer, you are now a scholar. And when you are a scholar, you are driven by questions. It is no longer sufficient simply to report. You have to ask questions and look for answers to them. That is the work of scholarship. You will also be formulating a hypothesis. And what do you think is the answer to your question before you've done any of the research? So moving from hypothesis, we're going to take that to a working thesis. So let's look at an example. A hypothesis might be that messaging seems, at least to you, before you've done any research, to have a negative influence on the writing skills of young people. So your working thesis could end up being, although some educators criticize messaging, research suggests that it may aid literacy by encouraging young people to use words and to write, even if messaging requires a different kind of writing. So here we find the hypothesis and the thesis did not match up. We may have thought before we did the research that it has a negative influence, but research suggests, we find in our working thesis, that it actually aids literacy. So what happens when you have a situation like this where your research makes you change your mind? You hypothesized one way and the research showed you that it was not the way it was. I'd say if that happens to you, count yourself lucky. You have just learned something. And that is really what research and scholarship is all about. If we had all the answers before we did the research, there would be no reason to do it. The reason scholars get excited is when they find that their hypothesis was wrong, and now they know better. That adds to the body of knowledge. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a very good one in your journey as a scholar. Our theoretical lecture and readings this week suggest that it still makes sense to use the library to conduct research. Why can't all research be done online? Well, first of all, there's this person in the library, your reference librarian, who is highly knowledgeable about sources that you can use in a research project. Let's hope this person knows a thing or two. My experience is they are angels in disguise. I'm very good at doing searches online, but I am not a reference librarian. So that person can be hugely helpful to you in finding sources that you are unlikely to find on your own. You also have access in a library to vast amounts of information that can only be gotten there. Scholarly databases and catalogs of material will have works that you can't find online. There are reference works in libraries that are not available online that could help you depending upon your project. And as we discussed in our theoretical lecture this week, the sheer act of wandering in the stacks, those rows of books, and finding what is around the book you were looking for can open up a whole bunch of new research that's very helpful to you. Of course, you will also do internet research. But what does that mean practically? Well, most of all, it means that you are in some danger if you're not careful. There is everything in the world to be found on the internet, including a lot of bogus information, poorly put together work, and work that appears to be accurate and isn't. So we have to be very mindful that just because we found it online does not mean it is true. We must use authoritative, credible, and reliable online sources. So here's a tip, and this is a great one for you. VIU Online provides access to VIU's online library resources to you, the VIU Online student. The materials you find there are authoritative, credible, and reliable. If you use those sources, phew, you do not have to worry about whether they are trustworthy. We subscribe to two wonderful online library resources. One is called Learn, L-I-R-N, and the other is eBrary. And you can find these by going to the VIU Online Library and accessing them. This is part of the privilege you receive as being a VIU Online student. You will find sources you won't find elsewhere, but the best part of all is that someone has already vetted them for you, and we trust those. If you find them there, you can use them reliably and with great comfort in your research papers. You may choose to do some of your own field research for your research project. But what does that mean practically? Well, you can conduct interviews. You can call somebody. This is a tip that I found very helpful in graduate school. Have you read something you like from a scholar who is still active? If so, contact him or her and ask for an interview. Many scholars are affiliated with universities. You can call those universities or go on their websites and find their phone numbers or email them and ask them questions, and what they tell you is original work that you can put into your research paper. It's a very exciting way to add a new source to your project. You can do an observation. That is a form of research where you are observing and then reporting on what you see. Conducting surveys is another method of doing original research. You will also need to decide whether to quote a source or to paraphrase it. But what does this mean practically? Well, we quote when language counts, when the exact words someone has used matter, when the way they've put it is part of what you're trying to capture for your reader. In my example in the theoretical lecture this week, if I said the sky is blue, I don't think that's language that needs to be exactly captured in that way. It could be paraphrased. But if I said something that was very dramatic, the word choices mattered, then it would be worth quoting exactly in the language that I used. Here's a tip. Be careful when paraphrasing not to alter meaning. So let's say the quote would be, Mary said, quote, I don't like it. The correct paraphrase would be, Mary said she didn't like it. You would be paraphrasing incorrectly if you used any of the examples at the bottom of this screen. Mary despised it, Mary hated it, Mary complained about it. You see, you're taking I don't like it and adding your own spin to it there. I don't like it is not the same thing as despising or hating, and it's not necessarily a complaint. So when paraphrasing, be very careful that you don't alter what the person said by putting your own bias or spin on it or interpretation. You will also consider whether to use visuals and media in your paper. But what does that mean practically? Well, this is the most important point about this from the writing point of view. The visual or media must make a strong contribution to the written message. It shouldn't be there just for window dressing or fluff. It has to have some substance, some reason that it is there. Very often, a visual will capture a large amount of data in a way that the reader can see it easily. It makes it easier for them to consume it. So don't put it in there just to pretty up your paper. It has to pull its weight and add something to the message. Finally, you will need to master APA style for the papers you write for this course and for all of your VIU online courses. But what does that mean practically? Well, A good tip is to find examples of books and papers written in APA style. That, in addition to what you've read in your textbook, will not only show you in the textbook how to do it, but what it looks like in an actual paper or book. You can study the section on APA style in our textbook, but if you'd like to go a step further, you can consider purchasing the publication manual of the American Psychological Association, and this can be purchased online from any reputable book dealer. This is the book that everyone uses when creating the rules for APA, and you see the 6th edition, which is the most current. You need to know what the latest edition is. Right now it's the 6th, and that is the one we all go by. So our advice is to keep practicing the APA style, because in time you will get the hang of it. Patience is what you need. This concludes the practical lecture for week 2.